Light, and I'm going to be your kindergarten teacher tonight. And please welcome the extraordinary Ariana DeBose.
Oh, Judith Light! Judith Light! Does that make you happy?
No, I don't care.
Just sit right here.
Just got to be on your best side, right?
Oh, my. Wow, thank you guys for coming and thank you for staying. Oh my gosh, so
Yes,
fun.
absolutely. And thank you for your performance. And for this movie. So we've known each other quite a long time, and I've seen her do just about everything. This really took my breath away on a lot of different levels, and I believe Variety said that she is a radiant force of nature. And I don't think anybody could articulate that any better at all. So it's my understanding that you've been nominated for an Academy Award. And for SAG Award, NAACP Award, Critics' Choice Award, and you received a Golden Globe. And
Also, I was just really excited. I was BAFTA nominated, and twice, which is odd because I'm like, I'm very American. Did you make a mistake? But I'm so honored by all of it. Really.
yes, it's pretty extraordinary. And a couple of things. You know, there's the standard stuff that you have to ask, and one of the standard things is, where were you when you found out? Who told you, and how did you feel?
Oh, okay.
On any of them. You could talk about the Oscar, you could talk about any of them.
Okay, well, when I found out I won a Golden Globe, I was at my home in gym clothes. And that was honestly the most comfortable way to win an award. The SAG nomination was actually a very cool week. I was hosting Saturday Night Live. Thank you.
You all see her do that.
It was so fun.
That was beyond.
It was so fun and so wild and terrifying.
What was terrifying about it?
Because in my brain, I was like, these people, they do this every week. They are so great at sketch comedy. And I don't know, there are moments where I'm just like, I'm not that funny. So I need to work really hard so I don't ruin their show. So that's what I did. I just worked really hard so I didn't ruin the show.
You didn't ruin the show. You elevated it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I had gotten the opportunity to sleep in the one day, and that's when I found out about SAG nom. And the Oscar nom, I hadn't slept at all. I'm normally very chill, but for some odd reason I couldn't sleep. And my best friend, who was also my prom date, arrived at my apartment, and he was like, wow, in all the years I've known you, you are not well. So we're gonna go for a walk. We are not going to get coffee. You don't need any. We're gonna go for a walk. And we were on the East River when I got a phone call from my team, and we were by the highway, so there were so many cars just passing by. So I answer the phone, and I hear nothing. I just see faces, and they're all very happy. And I'm reading lips, and I was like, Oscar nominated! And I scared all the runners that were running by me. It was a classic, iconic New York moment.
It's really extraordinary. And one of the things we were talking together here earlier, and I was talking about how hard you have worked. And I don't mean that in any other way other than I know you're devoted to what you do.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the audition for West Side Story?
Oh my.
And were you nervous? Yeah.
Well, yes. You know, I auditioned. I was working on Broadway at the time. I was playing Disco Donna Summer in the Donna Summer. Thank you, my friends. And that was a really challenging show. It was really like my first foray in being a leading lady. You saw it. She comes to most things that I'm in. It makes me really happy. And Cindy Tolan called one night and asked me if I'd come in the next day at like 10:30. Mind you, this is after the show. And I was like, okay, well, where am I going? She's like, Brooklyn. And I was like, Cindy, Brooklyn? And then she was like, okay, but just come and you'll sing and dance and then you'll read. And so I took one look at the sides and I called her back and I was like, please don't make me do that. Because well, Tony Kushner adapted our screenplay from the original author Lauren's text. And
most of you would know Tony a lot from his theater stuff, Angels in America. Yeah.
Which changed my life. Like, I am such a devotee of the Kushner. And I took one look at those sides and they were expanded. Like, it was nothing I'd ever read in regards to West Side Story. It was very wordy. And I was like, there's no way in the world I'm gonna be prepared for this. And I was just like, I'm a woman of color. I can't walk in and just wing it. Like, that's not what we're doing here. And on the off chance that Steven Spielberg sees my tape, I would like it to be good. So I just said, I was like, I would really love to sing and dance for you tomorrow, but I would really like to, if you're interested in what I do, I'd love to just come back. She was like, don't worry about it, I got you, just come, just come. So I got there that day, it's not done. Like, that was the beginning.
Just come, we'll
come.
fix it.
It'll be fine, I'll fix it. Okay, so I get there, I'm warming up, I made it to Brooklyn, thank God. And I get there and everybody's really on edge. And there are lots of jets and sharks and a few women who I recognize and they're auditioning for Anita, da-da-da-da-da. So I learned the dance, la 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 la. Justin Peck is amazing and incredible and of the dance world. And I just was such a fan already. Learn the choreography and then we go into the room to like show it off to what I just assume is, you know, camera, an accompanist. How about all the producers and Steven Spielberg? Sound like a good idea?
And you didn't know that until you walked into the room.
Not a clue.
Oh my word.
It was like the craziest, cold read scenario sort of thing. Cold dance. My version of a cold dance. And I was like, ooh, I literally said I wasn't gonna read today. Am I gonna stick to that choice? And I said, you know what, Ariana, you are. So I went in and I danced, and he liked the way I danced. And he said, okay, would you sing? And I was like, I'd love to sing for you. And so I sang.
What did you sing?
I had to do a portion of America, and Tony Kushner was my Bernardo, because there were no Bernardos present that night. So that was fun. And then he said, I love the way you sing. Oh my gosh, where did you come from? And I was like, Broadway.
Many shows on Broadway.
Many shows. Very, very blessed. 6 Broadway credits to my name at the time. And yeah, it was really great. I think Teddy Brunetti's here somewhere. We did a Bronx Tale together. Hi, my man. Thank you for being here. Love you. But it was wild. Anyways, the dreaded moment came, and he was like, so will you read? And I was like, nope. And
you actually said
I
no?
actually said nope. And I was giggling and smiling because that's how I handle, you know, an anxiety attack or a stress or an aneurysm, one of the two. And he said, excuse me? And Cindy Dolan, thank God, a blessed casting director who actually had my back. So grateful. Was like, no, Stephen, we talked about her. She's starring on Broadway. She literally just wanted to be prepared. And he said, okay, so you're not going to read today. And I was like, no, sir. And he said, but will you come back? And I said, I would be honored. And so the next week, he brought me back, and that led to a secondary callback, and then I got the job while I was sitting in a nail salon, and that was pretty iconic.
You're in very unusual places when you hear good news.
On the highway.
You were having your nails done?
I was having my gels removed because I felt like I had done the matinee and I felt like there was a lady in the front row who did nothing but stare at my undone nails the entire time. And I was like, I will not be shamed. One more show.
Was it Stephen that called you?
Well, I saw with foils, because when you get gels removed, you got foils on your nails. So I was sitting there and I was like, that's an 818 number. Excuse me, ma'am, can you help me answer this phone call? I think I should take this. And she was like, okay. And so I get the phone, I'm like, hello. It's like, hi, this is so-and-so from Stephen's office. I'm going to transfer you. He's on a plane. So if the call drops, he'll call you right back.
I can't, I'm having my nails done.
I was like, could you imagine? I was like, I've already told this man no once. Maybe I should
right.
not do that again.
Not a good pattern
Not a good
to
look.
establish. That's good. Right.
And it was a little choppy, but I could hear him, and he was like, hello, because he's shouting. He's on a plane. Hi, Ariana, da-da-da-da-da. He said some nice things, and I was like, what's happening right now? And he finally got to the part where he was like, I just wanted to say or ask you if you would be my Anita. And I remember it so clearly because it was the difference for me, the difference in that, it was an ask. He didn't tell me that I was going to be Anita. He asked me if I would be. And it felt like an invitation to actually collaborate. And that was really special to me. I didn't mention this part of the story, but in that first audition where I said no, before I left the room, he asked me if there was anything else that I wanted to share about the material or my thoughts or anything, and I said, there's just one thing. I was like, well, I'm Afro-Latina, I'm a black woman, so if you are considering me for this part, you should also know that I would be the darkest skinned woman to do this on screen. And Afro-Latinas were very real, and if you want to cast me, I would encourage you to consider that in the context of your script and your film. And if you don't want to do that, then you shouldn't cast me. And it was very.
You said you shouldn't cast me?
Yeah, I did.
Nobody does that.
So I don't know. I mean, I must have just woken up and eaten my Wheaties because these things just kept falling out of my mouth, and I couldn't stop myself. But I have no regrets, not just because it's all gone so well, but because it was, I don't know, it was my truth. It is my truth. Nothing about it has changed, and I was just really excited that someone like him could hear me.
What did he say to you when you said that?
Oh, he sort of stared at me like I had 5 heads, and then he said,
and probably,
wow.
Do you know what an Afro-Latina is? Just
I'm not going to say that part about it.
Right.
But he literally just sort of looked at me and was like, wow, okay, absolutely. And then he turned to Tony Kushner, and Tony was like, yes, absolutely, and I hadn't thought about that. But the next time that I saw them, there were adapted scenes. And I was very proud of that because it sort of felt like I was already reflected in the work. And I also knew, because sometimes that happens in the context of audition processes, you'll say things and then suddenly they wind up in the scripts and you don't get the job. But for me, I was like, even if I don't get this job, if it goes this way, if it's another Afro-Latina, the work will reflect them. They will be seen in it, and that was the point of it, because to be seen is an honor. And we're not seen all the time, so.
Right, and so how was that collaboration with them? Did that continue?
Yeah, no, it's the whole process, and that was what was cool about the audition process, is that it was indicative of everything else we experienced. If I ever had a thought or an inclination, there was a day we were doing the Lieutenant Schrank scene, where he comes to really interrogate Maria. And I had read the scene, and I was like, there's something here, but it's not on the page. And then I was taking sewing lessons on that very vintage Singer sewing machine, and I heard that sound. You push the pedal, and it just is like, and in my brain I was like, that's the sound. So I said to Steven on the day that we were going to shoot this, I was like, I have an idea. I'm going to try something. He was like, okay, go for it. And so Corey sang his lines, and I just put my foot on that pedal, and I let it go. And Steven looked at me like I had 5 heads, and then he realized what I was doing. And he said, I have to change the shots. And I was like, you get me, you see what I'm doing. And those were really exciting moments, because I was like, oh my God, we're doing this together. And that's really what it was, whether it was moments like that or working on the script while we were rehearsing. And it wasn't just about him asking me my opinion, he asked everyone their opinion, our entire cast, especially our Latinos.
Yes, I was going to say there's all of the
I believe we have 32 dancers making their on-screen debuts. And also, when's the last time you've seen that many beautiful Hispanics on the screen? Like that, you know, we can say many things about representation in this industry, but that doesn't happen every day. And we've been really lucky to have several films that reflect us in many ways. And that is exciting to me, because there's a long way to go, but that's steps in the right direction, and we still gotta take steps.
I really appreciate that you're acknowledging what has been done and what else has to be.
Yeah.
What else has to be done? So when you were in the process of all that collaboration, that was something that continued all the way to the very end.
The very end. And in every facet, like whether it was music or choreography, Justin was very collaborative.
What does that mean with a choreographer? Usually they have their very distinctive ideas, and they come in and they say, this is what we're going to do, and, you know, and you're going to do a tour jeté here, and then did you also say no to that?
You know! Cajones, ay que coño. You know what I did say? I was like, you know, I just feel like we could play to my strengths. I did say that. And
what do you consider your strengths?
Well, given the time period, and at that point I had seen what Paul Tazewell had up his sleeves for these gorgeous costumes. I was like, great, those skirts are going to be really heavy. So how do we show them off? And I was like, she needs to twirl, she needs to turn.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can turn, so let me do that. And I was like, let's play, for some odd reason, I was just like, let's keep playing with circles. Like, it's all about circles and spheres. And then Justin was very interested in, he watched, you know, countless videos of the mambo, from like, whether it was the mambo, like, performed by white folks or performed by Latina people at the time, Puerto Rican people at the time. And so you have this interesting hybrid of Dance at the Gym on screen. Because it's actually, I would love to be able to sit here as a dancer and say that it's completely derivative from Hispanic culture. I don't actually believe that, but what it does have is our spice and our personality on choreography that is recreating its own language. In the same way that Jerry Robbins and Peter Gennaro created a language that the Broadway community and the musical theater community has built upon. Justin Peck was charged with the challenge of doing that for a new generation, and that's what we have on the screen. So it's a beautiful hybrid, and that's what's happening throughout this film in context of the choreography, I think.
Right. So you have a lot of Broadway people. I mean, Paul Tazewell.
We did Hamilton together. He designed Hamilton.
That's right, and he designed a play that I did called Lombardi.
That's right.
And so you have a lot of these Broadway people that are there. Did that feel comforting to you? Did that feel like you were with your people? I mean, you've done so many Broadway shows. I mean, since 2011. I mean, you have this sort of your own particular legacy, and here you have all of these other people who have come from another aspect of your work. Just talk a little bit about that, about how you were surrounded by other people from Broadway as well, you know, all of your dancers. And
Yeah.
So
No, it felt like home, you know. It felt like home. Yes, we were making a major studio film,
Right.
but it was honestly like going to theater camp every day. You know, but my camp counselors were Steven Spielberg and Tony Kushner. You know, so but it was oddly really comforting, and it's something I'm super excited about because it's not every day that theater talent is given the opportunity to work on screen in this
That's right.
way. It's really, really rare. I have started talking about it because who knew I'd have an opinion on anything. But I don't feel like Hollywood's been in the business of making stars.
Say more about that.
Well, I mean, if you look at old Hollywood,
Right?
there was a time where these studios, like Judy Garland was not a name until she was a name. Like Fred Astaire was not a name until he was made a name. And I feel like there was a time when, well, I'm gonna say something else. There was a time where you weren't working in Hollywood if you were not a triple threat. If you couldn't sing, dance, and act at the same time, you weren't getting a job. And yes, that's 1950s. And thank you for clapping because I do appreciate that. But it's been interesting when I got to New York. For me,
You mean from North Carolina?
from North Carolina. Yeah, I moved when I was 19 from North Carolina. And when I got there, it's not that triple threats were dying out, but we were not the ask. We were not the commodity. The park and bark was prevailing, to be perfectly frank.
Right.
Well, and that's a very specific skill set too. But being asked to sing and dance at the same time was not what was being asked of folks. And if you did have that skill set, you were in the ensemble or you were the understudy. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. It just meant that when I first got there, you weren't really given the opportunity to audition to be a leading lady. And I realized that very quickly. But I also
And how did you relate to that?
well, I mean,
How did you get yourself to a different place? How did you hold that? How did you deal with that emotionally? Because that's tough.
it is.
Not being seen. I mean, what you've been talking a lot about is about being seen. And you're saying you weren't being seen.
Oh no, I didn't feel seen. When I got there, I was very lucky. My first job was with Andy Blankenbuehler, and he gave me a really great opportunity to create a character for a musical that did sing, dance, and act. She had great step-out moments. It was a really wonderful learning experience. But then from that moment, or after that moment, it took me another 6 or 7 years before I could really change casting directors' minds about my talent, because I was only offered an audition for roles that were like featured roles, but you were in the ensemble, carrying the ensemble, in specifically dance-based shows. It was actually very hard for me to get an audition for anything that was not dance-based. And it was hard, I'm not going to lie, it was really, really hard. But I was very committed to changing people's minds, and that meant I had to train. And so I got my happy ass in vocal lessons, and I took the acting classes, and honestly, I was not very good for a long time. And when I did get opportunities to audition, sometimes they didn't go great, but I fell on my face and then I try again. I learned from it every time, and I took the feedback. And then around the time that I was doing Hamilton, I had sustained several injuries during the context of my time in that show.
Yeah.
Neck injuries and shoulder injuries that changed the way that I dance and move. In fact, I don't dance the way that I used to anymore. I physically cannot. And so I had to change my tactic and figure out how I could get a different kind of work. And that meant I had to become a better actor. And
Where do you think you get this kind of resilience?
my
Where
mom.
your mom?
My mom. She raised me as a single parent.
Right?
Yeah, we raised each other. She's also a public school teacher in North Carolina. great. Public school teachers, by the way, are angels. Absolute angels, and they're not paid enough. And especially the arts teachers. It's always the first to get cut. It's really disappointing. But I was raised by a very strong woman who taught me to know my mind and work really, really hard to speak up for myself, but to know that you're not owed anything. And if you want to succeed at something, then it's your job to learn everything you can about that thing or that subject, and to be knowledgeable, to not just rely on your talent. And so that's what I did. Even when I got to New York, I didn't go to college for any of this, you know. But I believe in education, so I had to figure out how to educate myself. So I watched every YouTube video I could find, a lot of actor studio, and then I just started watching videos and studying them, not enjoying them. So that was a way that I could educate myself. I remember watching you. I went through and I watched everything that you were in, whether it was Law and Order or your films that you made in the 80s that are now on YouTube, thank God, because I learned a lot from them. Many of them you helped produce. You made your own work in a time that they weren't making work for you.
Yeah, that's
Badass. That's how it gets done. You know? And I took notes.
But it's an interesting dynamic that we're talking about, because, you know, there are, of course, a lot of, certainly people in the business, a lot of actors here, and we're talking about the value of what you have to do.
Yeah.
That it doesn't just happen for you. It takes diligence and perseverance and a tremendous amount of really hard work, and in this particular piece, you're living part of a legacy. I mean, you're with Rita Moreno, and then you're following the footsteps of all these other Marias.
Yeah.
I mean,
Anitas.
Anita's. And so, in creating your own Anita, how do you take this resilience that you have and this understanding and be the triple threat that you are in this movie, in that way? I mean, Debbie Allen did it too.
Debbie, Cheetah, Nancy Ticotin.
Yeah, I mean, but yours is distinctive. Do you think what you went through, some of the stuff you were just talking about, do you think that is what you drew on to change, to continue the legacy, but to change it and make it yours, completely yours?
That's a really good question. I hadn't thought about it that way. Certainly, there are parts of my journey that were very useful. A lot of pain. Rejection is a very powerful motivator. Rejection in many forms. Rejection by your family. Rejection by communities. You know, I have many personal ties to this story. I'm a queer Afro-Latina. So that has its own implications. Thank you. But I'm out and proud and have been for a very long time. But I also am someone who grew up, you know, my mother's white, and I was raised by the white side of my family. And when you are the only person who looks like this in your community, you don't see yourself reflected, and sometimes you don't feel like you have allies, and you will never be white enough. In certain circles, I'm still not black enough. That's a real lived experience that I have, and I'm, you know,
Latin enough?
I mean, I think so now. I will tell you this though, when
But you know what I mean.
Yes,
it's
of
like,
course.
Is
No,
there
there
seeing happening?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. The shit of it is, pardon my French, when I was a kid, because I didn't have access to my culture, I wrote this story in my head that the Hispanic community didn't want me. Literally, because I didn't speak Spanish growing up, and I grew up in a river town, New Bern, North Carolina, and we had many immigrant communities that formed there, but they predominantly spoke Spanish, and because I didn't speak Spanish, I couldn't find ways to connect with them, and I was also having trouble connecting with other kids. Actually, I connected best with young people who love the arts.
Right.
That was my great
So the
connector.
dancing was your
Was
way
my connector.
in.
That was my way in. It always has been. And I guess growing up, I struggled with acceptance on many, many levels. This character struggles with acceptance. You hear it talked about in a few different scenes. You see how people react to her, many different, who belong to both communities. She's also an ambitious woman, and sometimes ambition is off-putting. And that creates problems between women.
Mm-hmm.
So I identify with her in that way. I think you asked specifically or referenced the legacy of it. There is a lot of legacy. This was a scary job to take on because there is 60 years of legacy that didn't necessarily belong to me, but now is mine as well. And I'm very proud of that. But it was hard because I wasn't sure when I even first auditioned if there would be space for a new interpretation of an Anita. But I believe in revivals, and I believe in reinterpretations and reimaginations, whichever word you like, of classics, because that's how we tell these stories for new generations. It's like nobody sits here, I'm on a soapbox, but go with me. Nobody sits here and complains about how many different productions of Macbeth we have, or Hamlet. Nobody's complaining about doing Shakespeare over and over and over again with different concepts. Why? Because they're classic. Because the stories and the themes are universal and we need to receive them. To me, that's my opinion of it. So my question became, then why can't we reimagine and reinterpret West Side Story? Because its themes, its source material is Romeo and Juliet, and its themes are just as important, potentially more now than they were in 1961 when the Robert Wise film came out.
Yes.
So that's why I was like, all right, if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. And I believe in doing things that scare you every day. So that's part of why I did it.
The story,
Yeah.
like you said, the storytelling of this is that the nature of this story is eternal.
Yeah.
What is it that makes this eternal? What is it that we are so compelled by? What is it that you're curious about this film that tells us something about us and our culture and our society now? That's a big, fancy question.
It is, Judith. Judith said I came with the big guns tonight. She said, I don't care that it's past my bedtime. We're going to ask the questions. Oh, my. I suppose this story is about two groups of people who actually have more in common than they have different. That was not eloquent, but I think you get my point.
I know exactly what you're saying. It's what's happening in our country right now. That's right. Yeah.
I was so fascinated that if these two groups of people would just actually sit down and talk to each other, there'd be a lot less needless killing and needless violence and needless death. Like, none of that actually needed to happen. There was a version of the world where Anita and Bernardo got to live in a bigger apartment and have those 6 kids and maybe even go back to Puerto Rico. There's a version of the world where, maybe Tony actually does become a better man, and maybe he takes over Doc's and continues Valentina's legacy. Things could have been a lot different if we just talked. We don't talk in this country anymore. And when we do talk, it's typically just to hear ourselves speak and not actually receive. And you see some of these characters doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I think in regards to Anita, I was really curious about her expressions of grief, because I think, especially, well, women in general and women of color especially are thought to be strong. And strength is a beautiful thing, but sometimes strength comes through in wild emotion. And just because you cry, it doesn't mean that you're weak. And I didn't actually feel in any incarnation of West Side Story I'd ever seen that the full breadth of Anita's grief was actually explored. And I wanted, if I was going to do it, I wanted it to be hideous and really hard to watch. And at least for me, I don't actually like to watch it. But I'm very proud of it because I think women really go through that.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever feel comfortable watching it?
No.
Okay, good. That's good. I'm glad.
No, I didn't make it to watch it. I made it for other people to watch it and think about
Well,
it.
and they obviously did and loved it. Just talk a little bit about your relationship with Rita Moreno.
Oh, you know, I'm so grateful to her. She opened, just by being who she is, she's opened so many doors for so many of us. We had a rocky start because I was just a ball of anxiety, and quite frankly, I didn't really know what to say. But she was really graceful with me, and this is gonna sound odd, but she didn't impede my process in any way. Like, she was always available and really supportive, and she'd make me laugh if she thought I was being too serious. But she let me have a process. And I think sometimes that's not what happens when someone has such ownership over a character. I mean, I actually don't know if there are two actresses who have ever really gone through a process like this. Like, I think it's probably extremely rare that you have two Anitas on the same set. I know it was challenging for her. It was challenging for me in different ways, just because I just so badly, I mean, I enjoy being liked. I would prefer being liked just to not. But I love her. I admire her. I really wanted her to like what I was doing, but I also knew that if she didn't, it wasn't going to impact the work, because the work's the work. And what I can tell you is that we have the greatest relationship because she supported me and allowed me to thrive. And she thrived on our set, and we did it side by side. There was never, I'm gonna stand in front of you or get in the way. It was really, she became a partner and a colleague. And that was really nice, because I can tell you something else, that's not what happens sometimes in generational relationships. So
That's right. And her grace and your grace made all of that possible. I mean, we're talking about so many different aspects of this film while we're also talking about so many aspects of you. And I just want to go back for a minute and just touch on the stuff that you and I both have a long history of our advocacy for the LGBTQIA+ community. And I wanted to know how that came about for you, how you have been there to support the community in the way that you have.
Oh, wow. I'll try and keep it brief, but there's nothing like brief about that subject.
I know, and that's, I mean, I guess all these people want to go home, or I'm just sitting here having a conversation with my friend.
And thank you for being here.
Yeah,
I
thank
haven't
you.
said that. Thank you for being here. You know, when I first moved to this city and was working on Broadway, I discovered Broadway Cares.
Yeah.
Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, and they, Tom Viola and some other representatives of the organization came and were speaking about what they do and how they advocate for folks not only living with but thriving with HIV and AIDS, and how they support people in need in the community and whatnot. And they were doing something called Broadway Bears. And I was like, well, I don't know what that is, but it sounds like a great idea to me. My grandfather wasn't as thrilled about that as I hoped he'd be. But I participated that year, and that was a year that there was an education component to the experience, and they were playing a documentary that you actually showed up and gave a talk back at. The name of the documentary escapes me, but I will never forget watching it. How to Survive a Plague. And I just was so moved because I had no idea. I never learned about it in school. I learned about the Black Plague. I was like, but this was a plague for the modern age, and I just couldn't believe that happened and nobody did anything. And that was also a moment in my life where I was coming to terms with my own sexuality, and I was like, I want to be involved. I want to, use my voice, whatever it's worth. And so I fundraised for every every event that I could. And then when the prom came along, my co-star and I, Joellen Pellman, I just think she's a doll, and it was her first job. This wonderfully beautiful queer young woman. And
For the extraordinary Ryan Murphy.
Ryan Murphy, like, also playing Alyssa Green for that particular project with Ryan Murphy, like, that was so important to me, because no tea, no shade, Ryan Murphy has given the LGBTQAI+ community more job opportunities than any other director, producer, period, in this industry in the last decade. And that's monumental to me. So when the film was gonna come out, I was like, this feels like an opportunity, we should do something. And so we called Ryan, and Joellen was like, tell him what your idea was. And I was like, well, it's our idea now. And I was like, I want to create something. Like, we want to do like a website or something that connects young people or anybody who watches our film to organizations that can help them along their journey with identity. This isn't about recreating the wheel, because these orgs are doing it already. And both of us agreed neither one of us really knew they existed when we were growing up. So that's why we created the Unruly Hearts Initiative. And in our first year, it's a great website, you should check it out, the unrulyheartsinitiative.org. We raise money when we can. In our first year, for these organizations, our 2021 partners were Point Foundation, Covenant House, and Trevor Project. And as we've seen, especially in the last 6 months, suicide rates are going up. So if you can support the Trevor Project, please consider doing so. But in our first year, we raised $140,000.
Well, in Covenant House, you've got the kids on the streets.
Yeah, sexually trafficked and homeless youth. So we're trying to help young people in any way that we can. Housing solutions, higher education access, and
From Point Foundation.
From Point Foundation,
Yes.
as you can see. Point Foundation, and then Trevor Project, suicide prevention. But there are many, many organizations that are highlighted on the website, and you can find anything you need. For parents as well, because that's important too.
Yeah, your devotion to that, your dedication, your perseverance toward the things that you are of service about is every bit as powerful as your dedication and your perseverance to your work. Now, you bet. You have other work that you've done since this. Can you just give everybody a little taste of what that is?
Yeah, well, you know what's odd? Just like a point of order. I made West Side Story, and then I made The Prom, and then I made Schmigadoon. And if you haven't seen Schmigadoon, it's cute. But kid you not, both those projects came out before West Side Story. Wild. But I had the opportunity to make a really cool six-hander. It's a sci-fi thriller directed by Gabriella Calverth-Waite called ISS. We shot it during the pandemic in Wilmington, North Carolina, where I was born. So that was a really cool opportunity. And Gabby's one hell of a filmmaker, I think. She brought you Blackfish and Our Friend, most recently, and then.
And where are we going to see that? When can we see it?
That's such a good question. I don't know.
Okay,
But when I do, check out my Instagram because I'll talk about it. And then Matthew Vaughn's Argyle, he's responsible for The Kingsman. He makes very fun action flicks. But Bryce Dallas Howard, Henry Cavill, John Cena, Catherine O'Hara, Bryan Cranston, and the great Samuel L. Jackson, and myself are in that film, and I believe that's a Christmas movie, and I hope you'll enjoy that when it comes to
I
light.
can't imagine anything that you would do that we would not absolutely love, adore, and enjoy. And I believe that this is only the beginning for you in this particular realm, in this particular field. This is the beginning. And when I look back and when I see how young you are, and when I look back at your stage trajectory and your bio and all the things that you have done, I just cannot imagine that you will not be absolutely flying through the world now. And particularly, I really want to acknowledge you for how hard you work, not just on your work and what you bring to the work, but how hard you work on yourself, because I know you do, and I know that it's reflected, and that's what's going to bring everybody to stand for you for the continuation of everything that you're going to do in your life. And I love you.